What's up, guys? I'm ArieRashelle and this is Too Deep. In this video, I want to talk about the ambiguous creature spoken of in the Old Testament called Leviathan. Now, according to many theologians and historians, Leviathan was probably just a crocodile, or at least something similar to a crocodile. The authors of the Bible just didn't know for sure what it was. Now, here's my problem with that. If the Bible is God-breathed and God is the one that created all things, why didn't he just reveal to the writer that Leviathan was indeed a crocodile? Why allow those whom he communicated with his own voice, I might add, to stay ignorant? Whenever we talk about the ancient world like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, King David, we speak about them as if they were ignorant and as if somehow we are more evolved or educated today. Here's what I'm saying. I went to a Christian school, and I remember in school they would talk about, in Bible class, they would kind of discredit what the Bible would say or cause doubt on the Bible by saying something like, oh, well, they didn't know that it was a whale, so they put down great fish because they didn't know that it was a whale. Like, that's kind of sad to say, because you're literally saying that God created something and he didn't know what it was. Like, that's basically what you're saying. Another Bible teacher that I had over the years said that, they didn't understand the difference between, a skin condition that turns your hands or your body white, parts of your body white, that is not contagious, versus leprosy, which isn't true at all. They had a strict way of testing to see if something is leprosy that the priest did that was directed from God himself. So I don't understand this idea that somehow we have become more evolved. I want you to keep in mind that during the time of Noah and Nimrod, they built a tower that could have reached into heaven. So much so that God got off of his throne to stop them and confuse their language. Does that sound like ignorant, uneducated Neanderthal-like people? No. So I can't get behind the idea that they were just ignorant of what Leviathan was, especially if the Bible was dictated by God himself. Now, with that said, let's look at how Leviathan is described in the Bible. So, Isaiah chapter 27 verse 1 says, "In that day the Lord with his hand and great strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea." So Isaiah, by the influence of God, describes Leviathan as a serpent and the dragon that is in the sea. Now, we've talked about both serpents and dragons in our past videos, such as From Lucifer to Satan and the Beast of the Field. Now, in this video, the Beast of the Field, we explain that Satan is a dragon and that dragon is a subcategory of the main category serpent, just as a lion is a subcategory of the main category big cat. And just to clarify, I believe that even though we cannot see all of these creatures, they're still around us today because spirits never die, and these are spiritual beings that can take on earthly form since they were created on earth. So let's keep going. Now, within that category of dragon, we have two main kinds that we know of. So we have regular dragons that, are on the earth, and then like Satan, for instance. And we have sea dragons, like Leviathan, according to Isaiah chapter 27 verse 1, which we just read. Now, with that said, let's look at some of Leviathan's characteristics. Now, according to Job chapter 41, Leviathan is a vicious, cold-blooded serpent that strikes fear into the hearts of all who see him, especially if you dared to rouse him. Just to set the stage of what's going on in this chapter. This is after Job and all of his friends are finished arguing, and God is now questioning Job, basically saying, if you can't do all these things I'm talking about, how dare you think you can question me and what I allowed to happen and what I do? So it's kind of basically God putting Job in his place. So Job chapter 41 verses 1 through 2 is what we'll start with. And I kind of just want to pick apart this chapter of Job because it really does have the most to say about Leviathan overall. So let's start with verses 1 through 2, and it says, can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose and pierce his jaw with a hook? Verses 7 and 8. Can you fill his skin with harpoons, or his head with fishing spears? Lay your hands on him. Remember the battle. You will not do it again. Verse 9 and 10. Behold, the hope of a man is false. He is laid low even at the sight of him. No one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. Who then is he who can stand before me? Verse 12 through 14. I will not keep silence concerning his limbs, or his mighty strength, or his goodly frame. Who can strip off his outer garment? Who would come near him with a bridle? Who can open the doors of his face? Around his teeth is terror. And let's look at one more set of verses 24 through 29. His heart is hard as a stone, hard as the lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid. At the thrashing they are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it does not avail, nor the spear, the dart, or the javelin. He counts iron as straw, and bronze as rotten wood. The arrow cannot make him flee. For him, sling stones are turned to stubble. Clubs are counted as stubble. He laughs at the rattle of javelins. So according to God, who created Leviathan, Leviathan is so vicious, so frightening that just looking at him, men are laid low. In other words, his appearance alone will win the battle. He doesn't even need to fight. Another verse I want to point out to you is verse 10. Again, I just want to point that out one more time. It says, no one is so fierce that he dares to stir him up. This tells me that Leviathan doesn't go out looking for his prey. He's not like Satan that goes out seeking someone to devour, as 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8 says. No, instead he lays waiting for his prey. His prey comes to him, which is very interesting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And just to iterate one more time, this is not, I repeat, this is not describing a crocodile. Crocodiles are not this fierce. They're scary and they're intimidating, but they are not this fierce. I'm just saying. Now, if this is your first video that you've seen by us under this category of too deep, here's a little warning. We like to get deep. Sometimes a little too deep. But with that said, I just want you to get ready because I'm about to suggest some things that sound a little bit crazy, sound a little bit out there. But just bear with me, and I want you to remember that we believe that Jonah was in the belly of a really big fish for 3 days. And then we also believe that Noah was in the ark with all them animals for multiple days. So I just want you to remember those things as I go into this next part. Job chapter 41, verses 18 through 21. His sneezings flash forth a light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. Does that sound like God is suggesting that Leviathan is not only a sea serpent or sea dragon, whichever you wish, but also a fire-breathing sea serpent or sea dragon. Yes, indeed, I did go that deep. I did just suggest that fire-breathing sea dragons are real. And you know why? Because God's not an exaggerator. He doesn't just embellish his stories or narratives. He does not need to make himself sound cooler than he is. Nor does he need to make his stories sound cooler than they are. He doesn't need to create a fake being to compare himself to so that you know that he is the baddest around. He doesn't need to do that. It would be a form of lying. In God, he's not a man that he should lie. So here's something else. All of these stories that we have about the past, they didn't just come out of nowhere. They didn't just make them up out of thin air. So could it be that those old fables of fire-breathing dragons, could it be that they were actually true, but we just can't see them anymore? In the Garden of Eden, this is what God told to Adam. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15 through 17. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, You may surely eat of every tree of the garden, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day that you eat of it, you shall surely die. Now, when Adam ate of the fruit, he didn't die physically, instantly. He didn't die in that very moment as he ate the fruit, but instead he spiritually died instantly. His connection from God was broken in that moment. We can see this when God's like, Hey, Adam, where you at? What does Adam do? He doesn't respond. He's afraid. He says, I hid from you because I was afraid, because I was naked. I was ashamed of it. So that connection that he once had with God, that's now broken. And as sin continued to consume us and we became even more and more wicked, could you not say that 6,000 years later, we are even more spiritually dead because we no longer even hear the audible voice of God? So, is it really too far of a reach to say that our spiritual bodies, which includes both our eyes and our ears, that we can no longer hear or see the spiritual world unless we have a gift? So, for instance, let me direct your attention to 2 Kings chapter 6 verses 15 through 17. It says, When the servant of the man of God rose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots were all around the city. And the servant said, Alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Lord, please open his eyes so that he may see. So the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. So the prophet Elisha could see the spiritual warfare because he had a gift. He was a seer. Today, we have some who have the same gift because gifts don't die, just as spirits don't die. But we don't know how to use them as Elisha did because we are so spiritually dead. So now with that said, since Leviathan is a spiritual being, that means he has to affect us even today. Let's look at the last thing that God says about Leviathan in Job chapter 41. Verses 32 through 34 says, Behold him, he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. On earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. Leviathan doesn't go out and hunt his prey as we read in verses 8 through 10, but instead he lies waiting for his prey to come to him. Here's why. He's the king over all the sons of pride. Everyone who seeks to wake themselves up and are only about their own gain willingly walk towards him. Why? Look again at how he leaves the path to himself. Verse 32. Behind him he leaves a shining wake. One would think the deep to be white-haired. Prideful people believe that they know best, that they're the ones that are enlightened, so they follow a path of what they believe to be light, even going as far to think that the deep is white here, that the deep is where wisdom lies, not realizing that the deep is where Leviathan lies. So they willingly go to their own grave because they follow the path of false light that leads them to false wisdom, and there Leviathan is waiting for them. And once he is aroused, there's no escape, because you can try to fight him off, but there isn't a weapon strong enough to destroy him, except for that of the redeeming salvation of Jesus Christ, which is how there's some survivors, according to Job chapter 41, verse 8. Lay your hands on him, remember the battle, you will not do it again. And this is why the psalmist said in Psalms 74, verse 14, you crush the heads of Leviathan and let the desert animals eat him. Real quick, I just want to point out, crush the heads of Leviathan. So he's a multi-headed, fire-breathing sea serpent or sea dragon. Real quick, just thought I'd point that out. But this is similar, the Lord coming and crushing the heads of Leviathan. This is similar to when God cursed the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. It says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So the psalmist was simply saying to God that he's already defeated Leviathan. Because of that, when he's removed from a person's life, Leviathan is thrown into the desert, just like Jesus says happens to unclean spirits in Matthew 12, verse 43, which says, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, but finds none. Why a desert-stricken, dry, waterless place? Could it possibly be because they came out of the water? Could that be it? Because the Psalms also talks about the monsters, or the sea monsters in the sea. So when removed from a person's life, they are sent to the desert as a punishment for tormenting that person, because it is torture to be in a place that lacks all that they depend on for survival, such as water. Now, that's just a thought. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. I'm just throwing that thought out there. But back to my main point, when you receive salvation and you are truly freed from the grip of Leviathan, all you have to do is remember the battle. All you have to do is remember how hard it was to get away from Leviathan, how hard it was to get away from pride, and you'll remember the pain, the suffering that it all caused. You'll remember all you lost because of it, and you won't do it again. So, just to sum everything up, Leviathan is a spiritual fire-breathing, multi-headed sea serpent that cannot be defeated by anyone other than Jesus Christ. He doesn't hunt as Satan does, but instead leaves a path of light behind him, leading prideful people to him. But let us know what you think. Is Leviathan a spiritual, fire-breathing, multi-headed sea serpent or sea dragon that we can't see anymore because our spiritual eyes are now dead? Or are we just digging too deep? If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, God bless.